A couple weeks ago, I made a poll asking my subscribers which character was more of a deuteragonist or secondary protagonist between Megumi Shigeru and Satorou Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen. Over 70% of you said that Gojo was the deuteragonist, which is interesting because Megumi plays a more supportive role in Yuji Itadori's character arc, while Gojo on the other hand seems to have a more detached role, going about missions on his own and generally just doing his own thing. Having said that, within the first 2 seasons of Jujutsu Kaisen, we learn that the overall story revolves around the implications of Gojo's backstory, rather than Yuji's. We even get a prequel arc where Suguru Geto's conflict with Gojo is explored, Geto, of course, being the current main antagonist. This seems to place Yuji's character arc and mission to consume all of Sukuna's fingers as a secondary plotline, parallel to the previous arcs, which were revealed to be consequences of Geto's past actions. This leaves us the question, is Yuji Itadori even the main character? Though character relevancies wax and wane throughout stories, it's interesting to note that in the first few story arcs of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji Itadori's prominence within the greater scale of the plot is actually quite minimal. So does this mean the question I should have asked wasn't whether or not Gojo was the deuteragonist, but rather the real protagonist? Hello Funkers, Tony Funk here. And today we're going to explore the unique narrative structure of Jujutsu Kaisen, and explore why the story seems to start off with a poorly defined main character, whether or not this hurts the story, and who really is running the show. But first, we have to talk about series creator Gege Akutami. After writing a handful of one-shot chapter stories for Shueisha's Jump Next anthology, Gege Akutami decided to create a horror manga with the hopes of making it on Shonen Jump. He originally conceptualized the story revolving around 2 murderous teens that needed to be stopped by a group of sorcerers, these teens being the prototypes of Rika and Yuta from Jujutsu Kaisen 0. After pitching the idea to his editors, he was then told the setting was too dark, and he was convinced to give the series a school setting to appeal to Shonen Jump readers, much to Akutami's chagrin. Motivated by the idea of being featured on Shonen Jump, Akutami conceded to multiple modifications of his original idea, albeit begrudgingly. This gave way to the creation of Tokyo Metropolitan Cursed Technical School's very first chapter. This manga followed Yuta's journey in controlling the curse known as Rika in an effort to keep others safe by learning about cursed energy at Jujutsu High. Due to the success his chapters had, Gege Akutami began planning the creation of a sequel manga that would better explore the roles of the other characters he introduced. Before finishing the final chapter in the manga, Akutami began planning the next series without knowing how he wanted to connect the 2 storylines. In the end, Akutami settled for keeping the same setting at Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School, but delaying any immediate connection to Yuta and Suguru Geto's previous involvement. Following the creation of Jujutsu Kaisen then, the 4 chapters of Tokyo Metropolitan Cursed Technical School were later published as a tankobon, retroactively titled Jujutsu Kaisen 0. This meant that the basis for Akutami's world building came from Yuta's previous stint at Jujutsu High, thus causing Jujutsu Kaisen's focus to explore the characters that Yuta had already interacted with. This means that originally, Yuji Itadori's role as a new student at Jujutsu High was never meant to be the main focus of the series, but rather as a way to reintroduce the characters from Yuta's storyline. When we look at how Jujutsu Kaisen 0 ends, we are left with a connection between Yuta and Gojo when it is revealed that Yuta is also a descendant of Michizane Sugawara, meaning he's distantly related to Gojo. Not only this, but the focus of the final chapter is on Gojo's relationship to Geto, where he says goodbye preceding Geto's apparent death. This is a setup for the exploration of Gojo and Geto's past, as well as teasing future information regarding Michizane Sugawara. So in other words, Jujutsu Kaisen 0 sets up a future story about Gojo. Why Yuji Itadori is posited as the main character during Jujutsu Kaisen, however, is quite simple. Gojo was already a teacher during Jujutsu Kaisen 0, meaning that without including any additional characters, Jujutsu Kaisen would have most likely focused on Gojo's time at Jujutsu High as a teacher, indicating that he would have very few areas to grow in the new sequel. This would have made Jujutsu Kaisen a difficult story to create, given that main characters typically undergo an arc, and considering that Gojo was a teacher, his story arc would have been linked to the successes of his students. Now though this isn't impossible to do, it wouldn't have been as satisfactory seeing Gojo's growth as a character from his point of view through his students' successes. Akutami's solution to continue to explore Gojo, then, was to introduce Yuji as a new student, so that the audience could follow Yuji's character arc, while at the same time be able to watch Gojo's story unfold. The plotline regarding Sukuna's fingers was clearly added to give Yuji artificial importance in the story as Gojo's past and developing conflicts unfolded. And though the plotline succeeded in keeping Yuji important for the endgame of the series, most of the arcs remain Gojo-centric. But okay, we know now that Akutami wanted to explore Gojo and needed a clever way to continue to do that without having a Gary Stu main character. But does this narrative mess mean that Jujutsu Kaisen is poorly written? Well, not exactly. Although Jujutsu Kaisen has a confusing set of priorities between the main protagonist and the wise elder archetype character, it doesn't mean that the protagonistic tug-of-war between them hurts the story. For example, whenever we see Gojo kicking ass, disrespecting his superiors, or learning more about his enemies, we're intrigued as an audience due to the implications regarding Gojo's importance to the story. And when the focus switches to Yuji, instead of there being a mood dip in the series, Yuji is able to keep the pacing exciting as we learn firsthand the intricacies of Jujutsu through Yuji's point of view. Not to mention the fact that Yuji is also likable and a pretty comical character. So although the structure of the overall story is divided between the lore-centric story behind Gojo and the character-driven story behind Yuji, both stories are equally entertaining and therefore accomplish Jujutsu Kaisen's main goal as a Shonen Jump series. But alright, who really is Jujutsu Kaisen's main protagonist? Well, it depends on how you look at it, but even so, I think there is one definitive answer. From a literary analysis point of view, it's 100% Yuji. After all, it's the character arc that we're following as the story unfolds. But from a nuanced point of view, it's 100% Gojo. Gege Akutami simply needed to make Yuji in order to explore Gojo's story following Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Otherwise, without Yuji, Gojo's story would seem out of place in a school setting. So in my opinion, though Yuji's important for the plot, at the end of the day, this is Gojo's story. But what do y'all think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, take care, and I shall see yas down the road.